when I was younger, very young, 9, 10, maybe 11, I'm not sure. But I do remember we on the ranch, we had 2 houses. And one of the houses, we let a fireman live in and his wife. And they'd help us with the horses. And they just lived there for free, and they'd help feed or whatever as we needed it. And this guy was probably the most influence of my life when I was younger. His name was Mr. Yeager, his first name was Harold, but I never called him. I called him Mr. Yeager, and boy, I tell you what, I yelled that a lot because he was a great guy. I would always say, "Where are you at, Mr. Yeager?" You know, and we'd go down to his house all the time. And me and my brother was older than me, 3 years older than me, but I remember in his garage he'd have this bow. This recurve bow, and it was on the wall, and I'd always just stare at it. You know, go in there and I'd stare at it, and I'd say something to him about it. Well, come summer one year, he said, "You guys want to learn how to shoot this bow?" And boy, I was like all on that, you know. And it was just a recurve, so it was really hard for me to pull. But I got it, you know, and I remember I practiced and practiced. He showed us some techniques, you know, where to hold the string and how to draw and all this stuff, you know. And we did it for a while and then got bored with it and we went on. And you know, that story is like, it's no big deal. In my mind, it was just a short little piece of my world as I was growing up. But you know, years later when I was in college, I'll never forget, I had to take an elective, and they said there was an archery class. And so I thought, well, I'll just take this archery class. And I hadn't shot since I was 11 years old. I hadn't picked up a bow or done anything with a bow. And I went out there, and I'll never forget it, because I went out there, and I started playing with that bow and shooting it and stuff, and the coach came over, and he said, you shot a lot, huh? And I looked at him and said, no. I mean, here I am, I'm 18, 19 years old, and it's been, you know, 8 years, 9 years, however long ago it was, and yet I did. I shot really good. I was amazed. I amazed myself, and I amazed this coach when I told him it had been, you know, I was 11 or the last time I shot this thing. And so I started to think about that story. God laid it on my heart, and I realized something, and I need to tell you another story to get you better on the page where I am at, or where God wants us to be. And that's about a horse that my mom had. When my mom passed away, the year before she died, we had a whole bunch of horses. And one of the mares, one of her favorite mares, foaled, and she named this horse Queen. Okay? And she passed away within a year after that. And so then 7 years go by, I think, maybe 8. And my sister, Joy, was talking to my dad, and he said, "Do you want this horse?" Because, you know, he had kind of gotten out of all the horses and everything, and he got rid of most of them, but he still had this one mare. And she had nobody had done it, just been turned out for all this time. And I'll never forget it because my sister called me and she said, "Hey, I'm really excited. I'm going to get Mom's old mare, or the filly that she had right before she died, Queen." Her name was Malika, but that meant queen, you know, so I always called her Queen because that's what she reminded me of. Her mama was the queen of the pasture, and so this mare was pretty much in control of any other horse in that pasture. And so I remember thinking, "Joy, do you really want that mare?" You know? And she said, "Oh yeah, that was one of Mom's favorite. The mare that had that baby was one of Mom's favorites, and she's just going to be great, you know." And I was like, "Okay, well, you know, it's been a real long time, and I don't think anybody's done anything with it." Went on. Couldn't be convinced of nothing but to take that mare home and start riding her. And so I'll never forget it. I went there, and I realized once I got there with my trailer to pick up this horse and take it to Joyce that this horse had never been caught. She was out in that pasture, never even been halter broke. And so I had to do everything that day. I had to get her halter broke and train, and then load her in her trailer. Now, I had a stock trailer, so it wasn't near as bad as if you know, trying to get him a 2-horse or something. I wouldn't even try that. It took all day, and I think me and my dad almost got, we had a fight. he didn't like the way I was doing it, and I told him it was the only way he could do it, and we finally got her loaded in, and one thing she did learn, Joy told me, she would always get in the trailer after that. Anyway, it's kind of the same thing I'm doing with this little filly. Is that being in that trailer is better than not. And so I'd make her run around, and then we'd try to get her in the trailer. But anyway, when she finally loaded up, she knew how to load after that. But she went home with Joy, or I took her there, and as they went on, she found that Joy had found this gal that trained horses, and she put 30 days on her for her, and she started riding her. Well, this horse was up and down, always up and down. And she'd call me and tell me progress report. We weren't anywhere near. I mean, I was about 3-4 hours away from her and where I lived. And so I wasn't there at all. I just heard reports from her about, one thing and then the other. She did this good, she did that bad, she did another thing bad, she did another thing bad, and then she did something good. So if you get the drift of where we're going with this, almost a year goes by, and really all she wanted, all my sister wanted is for her to ride, do some trail riding and stuff like that. She wasn't taking her in any kind of competition or doing anything that was really strenuous, but she just wanted her to have a nice horse. And so she went on, and I'll never forget, I get a call from her husband one day, and the horse had thrown her, trampled her, broke her ribs, punctured lung, and she's in the hospital. And I'll never forget this, because I never liked that mare. I'll be honest with you, I think y'all knew that already, but I never liked that mare because when she was out, she was the queen in the pasture. She told everybody else what to do. And nobody had ever told her any different. And so that's what she thought she was, the queen. And nobody, there wasn't anybody, including humans, that were going to tell her what to do. And so eventually, no matter what, she always got her way. And so after Joy got out of the hospital, she called me up and she said, "Can you get rid of this horse for me?" And so I took her to a sale and got rid of her. But the thing about it was, and the thing that I'm trying to get at is that, we take and we do stuff, and people are raised a certain way, and as Christians, the younger we can tell our children about Christ, the easier it's going to stick. As we get older, it's a harder process. And I think that right now we need so badly to instill on our children, our youngsters, Christ. Because right now is the time when it's so important, when they're young, when they're like sponges. That's what they are. When I was a kid and I learned how to shoot that bow, I didn't realize how it would stay with me. And I didn't realize that like this filly, and that's what I was kind of, I started thinking about that. This filly, I started her as a 2-year-old. She went by 2 years, and when she came back, I was not sure what she was going to be like, but I had already started her. And so, she had got a foundation, and she knew what she was supposed to do and not supposed to do. Some rules were set up. And I think our children, we need to set rules up. And when we're seeing effects and problems in this world right now of what we didn't do, that we let them be out on pasture, that we let them have their way, that we're doing things that opened up a whole new avenue in the wrong direction. We're taking Christ out of our schools. That just doesn't make sense to me. As I grew up, Christianity was everywhere. And now I would hate to be raising a child that I would have to fight so that he or she could be a Christian. But that is exactly what we need to do right now, is to fight for our children, is to fight for the youth, is to make sure that we are examples. Because that's who we are. We're Christ ambassadors. We're supposed to follow in His examples, and those examples, whether you have children or don't have children, we are examples. Mr. Yeager, I wasn't his son, but I can tell you one thing. He showed me a lot of stuff that I remember to this day. And I can tell you right now that every time we do anything, we need to be shining God's light. Because this world is dark right now. And we need to really brighten it back up. Bring God back into the schools. Bring our abilities and things that God has given us to use to shine out and say, we know Christ is here. we believe in Christianity, we know that we have a life after death because of Him. And that God loves us. Because, I talked about it last week. What do people have if they don't have Christ? What do people have if they don't have Christ? They have nothing. And so what do? They do nothing. They start doing weird things. The stuff that doesn't make any sense. And that's wrong. When we start putting our total faith in this world, there is nothing here that's going to last. But when we put our faith in God, He is and always will be. And He tells us how much He loves us all throughout the Bible. And He shows us by sending His Son so that we might live. I can't even tell you anything, that more impressive other than what Jesus Christ Himself has said in the Bible. He says this. He says that we are to come to Him like little children. If we don't, we're not going to make it to heaven. What does that mean? What does that mean when He says that? It means this. It means that because children are just sponges, they open up themselves. When you tell them something, they believe it and trust you. And that's what we're supposed to do with Jesus Christ. But even more so, if we are one of those late bloomers that didn't get told about Christ until later, we know how hard it was to figure out. But if we got started early, it's a totally different animal. And how much harder it is, like with that horse, to change their ways and to have them actually see something different is nearly impossible. And that's what we're going through right now. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that Jesus pointed out that we're to come as children. So we need to, and He said also, right after He said that, is that it would be a horrible thing for anyone to misconstrue or mislead one of His little children. So in other words, we need to go out there and make sure that everyone, including all the children, including any youth, and including all adults, know who Christ is. But you know what? I think a lot of it has to be shined down on our youth, because our youth are what's going to take over this world. And if we can get them to understand, boy, what a giant step we would be making. Because eventually they're going to. And we all have influence, whether we have children or not. We all can influence. We all can show Christ in our ways and our actions. I've got some scriptures I'm going to read to you all. And the very first one is Proverbs 2:6, and it's very simple. It says, "Teach a child to choose the right path, and when he is older, he will remain upon it." He will remain upon it. And then Matthew, Mark, and Luke all say this, the same thing that I just repeated earlier. They were talking, Christ was talking and telling everyone that unless we come to Him as little children, we will not get into heaven. So in other words, unless we open up our mind and say, okay, just like every child. I can tell you stories about my son when he was growing up and the things that, I'll never forget, this is a great story, and he's probably going to hate it when I tell it, but anyway, he's heard it 100 times, and probably y'all have too. Every time he hit his head, we smiled and laughed. We'd put him into the car seat, he'd bop his head, going into the car seat, we'd smile and laugh. To this day, if you bop him in the head, he smiles and laughs. Now tell me that isn't a sponge. It had to be painful, but at some point in time he realized that, or he thought, that's okay. And God is telling us it's okay. Tell our kids it's okay. That He has got it. That's what we need to learn. So if they stub their toe, they're not going to go die on us or act or think they're going to die. So if they go and they see the wrong thing in the world, they can stand up for it and say, don't do that. This is the way. We need to remember that. We need to remember that in all things. We need to remember that Christ is the way. And so right now, I'm going to ask Christ in my heart to lead, guide, and direct me. And if you have not done that yet, then wonderful. Let's do it right now. And even if you have, just remember, every day, He needs to lead us. Every day, we need to pick that cross up. Y'all bow your heads. Dear Lord, I know that I can't possibly get there from here. I can't possibly get to heaven until I have you in my heart. And I can't possibly do the work that you need me to do until you're leading me. So I want you to lead me today, to strengthen me, to help me to shine your light To show others that your love is the way home. And that we follow that and shine out your light as mirrors so others can see the way and come along. I ask all this in your Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen.